Hey y'all, it's Krypton Critics. I'm here to review Shaft from 1971. Now, this movie, clearly has a lot of influence upon, blaxploitation as a genre from back in the day, and a lot of people consider it like the, the father of that genre that came to be, that became very popular, because, in the 70s, it was very popular to have either sexploitation, Nazis, Black Power movement, feminist movement, commentary on Vietnam War, a cop drama that involves, drug trade, or maybe you can find a movie with all of them, that would be very convoluted, I would say. But yeah, this was all like a golden age of that type of commentary and putting it within the plot, and sometimes it is the plot itself. Now, in Shaft, the main character is John Shaft. And he is, I can appreciate how he started a whole characterization. Like, if you're not that familiar with blaxploitation, from back in the day, if you've watched things like Black Dynamite, it it's this character basically revved up in a more cartoony way, and he was very individual at the time period. I don't think any other film at that period had done anything like in his characterization. It was, at the time, it was very unique and different. And I think that's what a lot of, especially black people, just audience, gravitated to. Back in that, when it was released, some people were off put by the messages of racism, and how the system and just society perceives you based on your color and where you come from. Not like today, because America, we've solved that problem. But in all seriousness, Shaft is not my favorite character in this movie. Even though he is the title character and he, gets the most screen time, he's not my favorite. My favorite character is actually Ben, who I think he's a leader of some kind of Black Power movement, and he's getting his brothers together to initially fight back the white man. But I think he has the best character transformation, because Shaft is very stagnant. I'm a cool guy, but often I don't think about my consequences of my actions, and I'm just very suave, and occasionally I'll kick some ass. I know everybody in this community. I know everybody in Harlem. But yeah, Ben, he starts off like having these great ambitions and fucking up on the way, and not really being aware of his surroundings other than political landscape. He doesn't know how to survive, like run away from police, or I mean, he can fire a gun that he shows off earlier, but in the beginning of the movie, first act and halfway to the second act, that wasn't really painted that way. So he gets to change where he knows what he wants to do. He wants to help black people out, but not necessarily antagonize all white people, and just try to do what's right. Just trying to prevent all this horrible crimes that are being committed in Harlem. And I think, even though he doesn't say it, his actions speak a lot, and how he starts performing, with the situation he's been presented, because he's kind of thrown into the situation with Shaft because of a whole plot that Shaft is helping out this guy named Bumpy, who is a criminal, but he wants, his daughter back, who's been taken. She's like, in the movie, he says that she's been going off to college and says she's just a kid, and she doesn't deserve to be in this. And I think the best acting comes from Bumpy. Now, even though I said that I think Ben is the best character, I think the best performance is by the guy who plays Bumpy. I can't think of his name right now. The only actor I can remember off the top of my head is Rich Roundtree, who plays Shaft. But even though I knew from the beginning that he could be completely trusted, his lines and his tearing up about thinking about his daughter, not being around, not dead, but being kidnapped, it was emotional. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, you gave me so much sympathy just from him saying it. Like, I had to see him going on his own merry little way and trying to fight him off. It was enough of him just performing it, and I gotta give props to those few minutes. And he comes back with slightly more devious plot of that. He was always kind of on the take, but it went south. And there was one point where he kind of like looks at the camera and like, wait, is he somewhat breaking the fourth wall? Because he's, if you took that out of context, it seems like he is, but I'm not sure. But yeah, this movie is all about race war and taking out the crime that's already in the community and try to make it better for everybody. Big part of that humanity in trying to take back, what was great about the area is there's like this middle-aged woman that is very much like grandmother that keeps to herself. She seems to be really into sewing, and when Shaft is like battling these thugs, he has to like barge through her building that's in Harlem, and she's just scared for her life, but she knows who he is because Shaft knows apparently everybody in the neighborhood. He's like everybody's like like godfather. Well, not like the godfather, but he becomes the protector, looking out for his people in Harlem, because so much are they kind of like put to the side. A lot of times they don't explicitly say it, but we can infer, especially if you had seen it at the time and you were African American, you would just assume that African Americans in the inner city will being shafted. Goddamn, that was bad, but I'm full of bad jokes, and that's why you love me. And I go off topic. Now, the director of this film is Gordon Parks, and before he started production of this film back in the early 70s, he was a professional photographer, and he would put photographs that would be released by the government, and I think from a few books, that it started shifting the focus towards black poverty and the black experience and civil rights movement. Very much in the vein of the book The Jungle from 1906, which was to show the pain and suffering of children that were being exploited and the bad health conditions. He was doing it for general of the disarray and the abuses that had been going on for as long, well, definitely after slavery had been proclaimed to be ended. It was still the pain never left, and it still hasn't. And he beautifully showed that. It was just all about surviving and getting to the next day, and just hoping it'll slightly become better than it was. There's a few scenes that, knowing in retrospect, for the time period, you know, like obviously there's a lot of visual effects that were impossible to do at the time, and they're not just going to re-release it and add a bunch of CGI bullshit because there could be a certain movie series that started in the 70s that very interesting creative man could do, something like Star Wars, but they were smart not to do that, because if it's, one of the things that you can love about art is, everyone perceives it in a different way, and especially when a lot of people consider like, well, that's a straight up fault, and that was a short-sighted decision. It's all part of the tapestry of what makes it, really a film. And even with the most boneheaded decisions, you can still have some kind of enjoyment, and someone will. Like, there's something for everybody. You just always remember that. And I say that because there's a lot of bad ADR. And this was not uncommon for the day, for like someone was wrong with the audio and they didn't have the best equipment. Like I think this is the first like major, keep in mind major for back then, major motion picture with a major budget that had a black lead, and it's that's why it became so influential after that time period. It's like, well, we can do this. Our brothers and sisters can really pull through and show some impressive like representation of what we can be. I'm sure a lot of especially young black men at the day were like, I want to be like him. At the same time, I feel like there's a problem with that because he, I'm not saying he has to be Superman, but he does have some kind of brushed away faults. Like, I think, now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Shaft is a married man. And he just has sex with this white woman, and it's played off like very awkwardly, and it doesn't seem like it really needs to be there other than to set up a joke that is one of the last lines in the movie. And I think that's a really odd decision because like the first time it wasn't a joke, but the repetition of it, I guess comedy comes in threes. Whoever was writing or the director, Parks, was like, well, I need to utilize that formula. But it's I'm sorry, it's not that funny. The line is something like, close it shitty, calling the person shitty. The white girl that Shaft fucks says it. The lieutenant, who is like every like stereotyped police lieutenant, but he's we don't see him drink, but still pretty paint by the numbers what you would expect. I mean, he has some pretty decent lines, and the last one was said by Shaft on the line of the phone when everything's said and done, when he saves the damsel in distress, the daughter of Bumpy, which I think that is the best part of the movie, is when he teams up with the the armed black activists and Ben, and they go undercover as like I think doormen and chefs, excuse me, and they like ransack the room and they go after the mafia guys and they save her. A lot of it is due to how it's shot throughout this movie. A lot of action scenes at nighttime have a lot of contrast with the color, heavy blacks, and if someone's wearing a leather coat, it will show prominent shine. So the contrast is yanked very high, and I would expect, this would go back to the, photography days of Gordon Parks, and, sometimes it works beautifully. Other times it's hard to tell what's happening on screen because there's so much black. Not necessarily black people. I'm not saying that. Just composition on the screen of shadows and highlights, and sometimes it's a little overbearing. I'm not saying this movie is too black. It has to be, the blackest possible. This is, to some, the definitive blaxploitation film. There is a lot of good acting. And from each actor, pretty much each actor, that there's a really good scene with them. But there's another part where the focus isn't necessarily on them, and the acting can get a little choppy, but nonetheless, overall just very good. A lot of good tension and grooviness is made with the soundtrack by Isaac Hayes. Before he was saying white children, before he was doing that in South Park, he was making soundtracks for films, and I would say like 80% of the soundtrack is perfect in correspondence to the film. Like, I would listen to it as a whole. Sometimes the music doesn't fit well with the scene. I think the best part of the soundtrack is when it comes to the end, because it creates the best tension. And yeah, so I can only imagine Richard Roundtree. This I think this is the most praised and popular film he's ever done. Before I saw this movie, the most knowledge I knew about him is that he played a blaxploitation guy, and he was in the movie Steel, which no one wants to remember the fact that he was in that, because that is not a high point of his career, definitely. But yeah, I would suggest seeing the movie, especially if you're a film buff, especially if you are into blaxploitation. I think I would give it, a B. There are scenes that I really enjoy, but there's also a lot of lulls. I think the biggest lull is the first 10 minutes. Like, I understand that the Shut Your Mouth song, that introduces Shaft is, kind of like in a narrative sense, like set up, but it's not the best. I think that is the weakest song on the soundtrack, in my opinion. And apparently, I know there's sequels to this. I'm not sure if I'm going to watch those or not, but if someone says in the comments that I should, I just might. I would also like, quick side, I would like to thank you to Willie Ames, who played Bible Man. He started following me on Twitter, and I was very happy to hear that and see it. And we had a small back and forth. He was excited and happy that I understood the tongue-in-cheek nature of his film and his franchise. And apparently, I didn't know this until today that he wrote it. Um, and I'm gonna start uploading more regularly with film reviews. You know, frequently I will just watch a movie that just came out and I'll review it. You know, you know, me and my dad will just walk out of the theater and we'll get in the car and or we'll get to you know the house and we'll set up the camera and we'll just review. But I'm interested enough. I think I'm definitely going to take more of an effort that once I rewatch a movie, like still fresh in my mind, when I really soak in information that I'm perceiving or I'm seeing a movie I hadn't seen before. I should put on the camera and do my review. Thank you for staying here and listening to my bad jokes about being shafted. As part of the Critics, I love you.